I'd like to welcome Dr. Ailbhe Kenny, Lecturer in Music Education within the Department of Arts Education and Physical Education here at Mary Immaculate College. We're delighted to have you here, Ailbhe.
Thank you.
So Ailbhe, what is music education?
The aim of music education, I would say, is educating society to be musical. So in other words, whether that is a concert pianist playing in the National Concert Hall or somebody playing in their local traditional Irish group in the pub, ultimately what you want is for people to be musical, to enter into musical worlds, to participate in music and to encourage a lifelong interest in music.
What are your research interests?
My current research interests lie predominantly in looking at musical communities within local environments. So for example, I've just come out of quite a large-scale study where I investigated communities of musical practice in Limerick City. And that looked at groups of people who come together to make music together in some way. So really what interests me most is really looking at how these groups come together, why they come together, what happens when they do come together to make music? What are the roles? What are the relationships? What are the identities at play within those music-making processes? And ultimately, what practices do they develop as a community around music education? How do they learn music together? That's a particular research interest of mine. As well as that, other research interests include looking at how our student teachers here in the college learn within music education. What do they bring to the course when they arrive? What are their musical backgrounds? And then, or for instance, if they don't have a musical background, that's also of interest. And what values and assumptions do they bring about music education to the college? And how does that impact then on their learning here? And how does it impact on their identity as teachers, as people going out to teach music to children? So all of that, as I say, really interests me in looking at how that then affects ultimately their teaching of music education in classrooms. And of course, looking at how children learn music is of particular interest to me, because ultimately that feeds back into my work with student teachers and hopefully my work in classrooms as well.
How important is research in music education?
Research in music education, like any field of education, is significantly important. First and foremost, it challenges our thinking about the way we look at music education, about our practices, the processes of teaching and learning, how music education occurs in different contexts, in different genres. And it's only by researching those types of complex phenomena that you begin to understand the discourses around music education, the practices around music education. And by trying to understand and make sense of all of those various musical worlds, no matter what they be, it's only then that you can begin to shape your vision of what music education could be or should be, and basically inform best practice, both at a practice level on the ground, but also at a policy level. Because ultimately research should be constantly underpinning educational policy and challenging educational policy all of the time, and really questioning how we do things and how can we do them better.
What is the connection between teaching and research?
I would see teaching and research as really being both sides of the same coin. They're mutually reinforcing. So all of the time in my approaches to teaching, both at undergraduate and postgraduate level, I'm always looking to current research debates, looking at my own research and how that can inform my approach to teaching. Through my own research then, I'm informed all of the time because it forces me to reflect on my own assumptions about music education and my own thinking about music education and pedagogies of music education that I'm ultimately passing down to my students.
What has been your research journey thus far?
My research journey thus far, well, first of all, my interest in music education really relates right back to when I completed a Bachelor of Education degree, because I did that alongside music as my humanities subject, alongside education. So already at that time I was beginning to combine both education and music at a very practical and also a theoretical level. Therefore, when I went out to the classroom, I was viewed very much as a specialist in music education within that school and took on a lot of leadership roles at that time in music education. And that fed back into me pursuing a master's in music education while also primary teaching at that time. So what was nice about that is, of course, because I was also in the classroom, I was able to investigate aspects of my practice as a teacher during that period of time, which was a lovely introduction to research for me, because it was very grounded in what I did every day. From that, I took on a research fellowship at St Patrick's College that was in partnership with the Arts Council and local government. And that looked at how local authorities are developing music within local areas. So that sparked a whole new research interest for me in looking at how does music occur in local areas and regional areas, but also getting a sense nationally about what is taking place with music on the ground under the local authorities' remit. So again, I began to think about the influence of policy on practice, which is another research interest of mine, and began to see, well, what is that interface between policy and practice when it comes to musical communities? And from there, from taking up my role here in Mary Immaculate College, that ultimately led on to PhD research at the University of Cambridge, where I embarked on a very longitudinal study of music in communities and how people form communities of musical practice. So again, marrying that interest between policy and practice, looking at government-supported communities, and really getting in-depth insight into what exactly occurs in these people's musical communities, in their musical worlds. So that has been my research journey really to date, what has brought me up to this point, and brought me in all sorts of different directions and research interests.
Why are research collaborations important to your work?
Research collaborations are hugely important to what I do as a researcher, but also hugely important to academic institutions generally. Because what they essentially do is bring together really a sharing of expertise and knowledge and understandings that you wouldn't otherwise get from just one point of view or one research perspective. So in my own experience of research collaborations, I've had collaborations at local level, at national level, but also at international level. And that has opened whole new doors for me as regards thinking about research in new ways, looking at best practice elsewhere in research, looking at new research tools, new research methodologies and methods, and taking those learnings and then applying them to my own research. As well as that, of course, by writing in a collaborative way, that again makes you think about your research and your writing on research in new ways, and challenges my style of writing research and the way I think about data analysis, for example, and the write-up of that analysis. So really, by these research collaborations, they're hugely influential in a very positive way. As I said, this bringing together of different perspectives and different insights into how to do research, but also what to take from research and where to bring those findings and bring them onto new levels, whether that be national or international levels.
What advice have you for students embarking on music education research?
The very first thing I would say to any student embarking on indeed any research project is to be passionate about the subject you're investigating. Because when you're embarking on research, you have to live with this idea and with this research question for a long time. So you want to make sure it's something you're very curious about. It's a question that's been burning inside you now for a long time and it sparks your interest. And you want to find answers to those questions that you've been curious about. So whatever that research question is, you want it to carry you through your research project to sustain your interest right until the bitter end, when you finally come to that lovely point of writing up your findings and indeed your thoughts and insights from the research you have investigated. So that's the very first thing I would give as a piece of advice. And after that, I would say literally draw on as many different people and levels of support as possible. That's what, for example, this academic institution is for, but also look to your peers. Look for people who may act as mentors to you, whether that's during a process of writing, whether it's some people you tap into expertise on how to collect research, whether it's somebody who can inform you in your thinking, in your theoretical framework, but always look, is there somebody I can bounce ideas off of here? And sometimes that could just be the person at home you're having a cup of tea with, because often by talking through your ideas, you begin to make sense of what you're actually investigating, and also make sense of what you're finding and what is coming out as being most important to that.
Again, Ailbhe, thank you very much for taking part in our series of research profilers. We really appreciate it.
Much obliged.